very much. Sheila, thank you for that wonderful introduction. There was just one slight factual correction I'll make. I asked my wife out in high school. She was my high school sweetheart. I was not hers. She turned me down. She's not here to correct the record. She'll be actually coming back to Iowa. She was with me last week. She'll be back here on Thursday. We're spending all week here. We have an 8-year-old boy that started baseball camp. She's being a good mom. She wanted to go home, help him get adjusted to that, but she'll be back here as well. Thank you so much for being here. And thank you for waiting. What I want to do tonight is talk to you for a little while, but then spend more of that time taking your questions and hearing from you. Before I even start talking about 2016 and this election, I want to start with just a little bit of news of the day. You may have seen the State Department release more of Secretary Clinton's emails. Well, there's two problems with that. First of all, they only have the emails she chose to give them.
Yeah.
Those are only after she chose the email she wanted to delete or keep for herself. But here's the second problem I've got. Here's the second problem. You know, everybody's talking about the lack of transparency and this and that, but we need to be focused on national security.
Yeah.
The reality is, by her choosing to use a private server for what could have been confidential or secret information, what we know is this. The Chinese and probably the Russians already have those emails. We're going to be the last superpower to get to see those emails. That's a heck of a thing. We're going to have to call up a Chinese hacker if we want to see all of her emails. I got asked earlier today, does this disqualify her to be president? I said, does this disqualify her? The only thing she's ever run is President Obama's failed policies. Couldn't you? Right there are plenty of things that disqualify her. But today I want to talk to you about how do we get our country back on the right path.
Yes. Yeah.
We are right now on the path towards socialism. President Obama, Secretary Clinton, they are trying to turn the American dream into the European nightmare. Now, it's not too late to stop them, but the hour is late. I want to talk to you, the most dangerous thing this president has done is to redefine the American dream.
Yep.
$18 trillion in debt. More and more EPA regulations, Obamacare, a failed foreign policy, a lot of that can be undone. The most dangerous thing he's doing is redefining America. Also from today's news, you saw what happened with Greece, what's happened with Puerto Rico. That's going to be the United States. And there'll be nobody to bail us out. What did the governor of Puerto Rico say? He simply said, we can't pay the bills. Well, good luck if you tried that with your mortgage or your credit card bill next time that happened. Send them a little letter back. Sorry, we can't pay the bills. That's where we're headed as a country. When I hear this president talk about redistribution, when I hear this president divide us by class, by gender, by geography, when I hear him talk about government dependence, borrowing, and spending, that is not the American dream our parents taught us. I want to tell you a bit about my story. My parents, they have lived the American dream. Over 40 years ago, the first time they ever got on a plane, they flew from halfway across the world to come to Baton Rouge, Louisiana. By the way, they came legally. I don't think there's anything wrong with saying that folks that want to come to America should come legally, should learn English, should learn our values, and then roll up their sleeves and get to work. My parents came here, and I have to remind my kids, there was no internet, there was no Google, there was no way for them to go online and look up Baton Rouge or Louisiana. They were coming to an idea as much as they were coming to a place. They were coming to the idea of freedom and opportunity. They were coming to the American dream. My mom went to LSU. My dad needed a job. He didn't come to be dependent on government. He came to work. Got his first job by calling through the Yellow Pages. I don't know how many people hung up on him, but he finally convinced a guy from the railroad company to give him a chance. I love what my dad does next. Tells his new boss, well, that's great. He says, I don't have a car. I don't have a driver's license. He says, you're going to have to pick me up on the way to work Monday morning. I know we got some kids here. Don't do that on your first interview. That is not a good thing to do. The guy was so taken by his enthusiasm to work, he picked him up. 6 months later, I was born. I was what you would politely call a pre-existing condition when I was born. All that means is my parents' insurance didn't cover me. But I love what my dad did next. There was no government program, there was no paperwork, there were no forms. My dad simply went to the doctor and said, I'm going to send you a check every month until I pay this bill in full. And that's exactly what he did. He shook hands and he paid off that bill. You know, it was a simpler time back then. I asked my dad, how would that work today? How do you pay for a baby on layaway? I mean, if you skip a payment, do they take the baby back? Where's the hospital? He tells me I was such a bad little baby, they would have gladly sent me back if that was an option. He goes, no, you're completely paid for. The reason I tell you that is that's the American dream. My parents chased and they caught and they have lived that American dream. And that's what I want for my children, your children, and our grandchildren. We can't afford to become the next Greece. We can't afford to become Puerto Rico. We can't afford this march towards socialism. Now, there are a lot of people running for president. And a lot of them will come and say the right things, but we need a doer, not a talker.
That's right.
We've already got a talker in the White House. If talk was all we needed, we'd be on Easy Street. We'd be doing great. We had a first-term senator who had never run anything. Look, every Republican will come in here and tell you, I'm opposed to Common Core, I'll shrink the government, and I'm going to privatize this, and I'm going to fight for school choice. We're not just talking about those things. We have done those things in Louisiana. You heard Jill say 30,000 fewer state bureaucrats than the day I took office. 26% smaller budget. Top 10 economy for job creation. We fought for statewide school choice, so the dollars follow the child instead of the child following the dollars. This is what we got for you. The big government crowd will always tell you, well, there's not enough money. They'll always tell you, oh, look, government is always getting cut under Governor Jindal. My answer to that? Guilty as charged. Absolutely. We measure success by how people are doing in the real world, not the government world. 8 credit upgrades. More people working than ever before in our state's history at a higher income than ever before. That's what we need in D.C. The problem is when you go to D.C., even the Republicans tell you can't do things like that. Not just the Democrats. They'll tell you, oh, you can't really repeal Obamacare. You can't really shrink the size of government. You can't really balance the budget. Here's a little secret. We got 2 ridiculous court rulings last week. First part of the week, we learned that apparently words no longer have meanings. All you moms and dads, tell your kids, I guess the dictionary just doesn't matter anymore. That's what Scalia said in the Obamacare ruling. Then later in the week, Roberts tells us, I guess this has nothing to do with the Constitution. Supreme Court decides they're going to be a public opinion poll measure instead of a court and decides to change the definition of marriage.
Yeah, right.
You know, here's a dirty little secret, though. There are Republicans in D.C. that are pleased with this ruling.
Yeah.
They don't want to have to do the hard work of repealing and replacing Obamacare. They view marriage and religious liberty as distractions. They want to get these issues off the table. Only in D.C. would losing be a good thing. I think it's ridiculous. I think it's time for the Republican Party to stand for our own principles. You know, Jeb Bush said you've got to be willing to lose the primary in order to win the general election. I want to translate that for you. You know what that really means? That means we need to try to make the left and the media like us. Nonsense. We don't need a second liberal party. We don't need to be cheaper Democrats. I've got a novel idea. Why don't we try fighting for our own principles for a change? Why don't we go and convince American people to do that? Now look, when it comes to marriage, unlike President Obama and Secretary Clinton, my views are not evolving. For me, marriage will always be between a man and a woman, and it doesn't matter to me what, an earthly court can't change that.
That's right.
And I certainly support federal efforts to give us back our 10th Amendment rights, to let the states decide this. I also support federal efforts to define marriage as between a man and a woman.
Yes.
But make no mistake about it. The left isn't satisfied taking away our 10th Amendment rights. Now they're going after our First Amendment rights. And if you need more proof of that, not only did we pass the Religious Freedom Restoration Act in Louisiana, I signed an executive order several weeks ago defending individuals and businesses from the state discriminating against them or penalizing them for having a traditional religious belief that marriage is between a man and a woman. Today, the ACLU has gone to court to sue me. We sent a letter to all the state employees and clerks reminding them of their religious freedom rights under the First Amendment to the Constitution, under the executive order, under our state law, under the federal Constitution. Here's the amazing thing to me. If you go to the ACLU's website right now, it says they recognize religious liberty as a fundamental right. You go to their website right now, they'll tell you they actually fought. They went to court on the side of the Religious Freedom Restoration Act way back when. But now that the government is going after evangelical Christians and others for wanting to follow our conscience, now the ACLU has decided, well, I guess we're not for that liberty anymore. I guess they've decided, like President Obama and Secretary Clinton, they can pick and choose which amendments and which rights they want to support and when they want to support them. You remember, Hillary Clinton was the one that said, those of us that are pro-life need to have our religious beliefs changed. Well, I don't know about you, my religious beliefs are not between me and Hillary Clinton. They're between me and God, and I'm not changing them, even if they make her unhappy, or the New York Times unhappy, or the ACLU unhappy. I will say this slowly so even Hillary can understand this. The United States did not create religious liberty.
Amen.
Religious liberty created the United States of America. You know, as your president, I'll do four things. One, we will repeal and replace all of Obamacare. As Jill said, I'm the only candidate that has a detailed plan on how to do that. Secondly, we're going to secure our borders. No more talking about it, no more comprehensive plans, just secure the border. Third, we're going to shrink the size of our government so we can grow our private sector, our economy. We measure prosperity and how our people are doing, not how our government is doing. And fourth and finally, we're going to rebuild our nation's defenses. We will restore our foreign policy so our friends trust us and our enemies fear us. We will stand by Israel. We will stop Iran from becoming a nuclear power. You know, I need to actually correct something I said about President Obama and Secretary Clinton. I said that she's run nothing but his failed foreign policy. And I said every part of the world is more dangerous. We don't have better relations with anybody in the world. That's not exactly true. I mean, you look at it, this president did today announce he was going to exchange ambassadors, like open embassies with Castro in Cuba. He's trying to do everything he can to mollify the regime in Iran and try to pave their way to become a nuclear power. He's allowed Russia to march into the Ukraine and Crimea. He's basically allowing China to emerge ascendant in Asia. So I guess there are a few countries that are benefiting from his foreign policy. But I'd rather our allies benefit from our foreign policy. This whole idea of leading from behind, wouldn't it be better if we actually had a commander-in-chief who believed in American exceptionalism? I promise you this, you'll never see this commander-in-chief going on an apology tour for the United States, going around and apologizing for criticizing. I'm going to close with this. I'm asking you guys not just to join a campaign, but to join a cause. I'm asking you to believe again. As a child, I'd hear my dad tell me that Americans could do anything. I believed him then, and I believe him now. And I think in your heart, you believe it too. We need to have our faith restored. Reagan promised, he described us that we were this shining city on a hill, but he also told us this. He said every generation has to choose for itself to renew those principles of freedom. It's not inevitable. But I do think our best days are still ahead of us. I think America can dominate this century. Yeah. But the choices we make are important. It is not optional that we win this election. We've got to win in 2016, not for the Republican Party, not for the state of Iowa, not for the state of Louisiana, but for the United States, for our children and grandchildren. It is not enough to just send a Republican to the White House. We need to send somebody there who will make dramatic change. We need to send somebody there who doesn't mind if the Washington Post, the New York Times, or the establishment doesn't like it. We need to send somebody there who understands the hour is late. Socialism is not acceptable for our country. We need to send somebody there who's going to say the things you can't say, do the things you're not supposed to be able to do. We need to send somebody to Washington, D.C. to restore the American dream for our children and grandchildren. Thank you all very much for coming out today.